we are making this available for others that couldn't join us live tonight. So welcome to our first of what we hope are many opportunities for coaches and rules education throughout the course of this season and future years. This collaboration and partnership, I'll call it, is kind of a combination of between the MHSA, and for those of you that don't know me, my name is Cody Inglis, and I'm the director of golf here with the MHSA in my 7th year, and many of you I've met or have seen, and it's great to have you a part of this. We also have on the call Debbie Williams-Hoke, who is the president of the MIGCA, our Coaches Association. And we also, our main presenter tonight will be Kyle Wolf, who is the director of handicap course rating and junior golf for the Golf Association of Michigan. So Kyle's going to walk us through the bulk of our presentation tonight. I'm just simply here to, I'm going to do a couple things. One, monitor the chat. For those of you familiar with Zoom, the chat feature is a great opportunity to ask questions and type them out. It's on the bottom of your screen, and you can type in questions that might come up through the course of Kyle's presentation. Could be a question for me, or it could be a question for Debbie. Also, I'll kind of monitor just everybody's view and make sure that we're all set in terms of what questions that might come up for you. As it relates to the call, really, many of you are familiar with Zoom, but if you're not, you don't have to have your video on. That's simply not a requirement, but you can if you want. The best thing to do is to mute yourself. So no background noise can be heard, so you don't have any disruptions that might come your way, a dog barking, those things. Literally, you can sit back and listen and make sure that if you have questions, you can simply ask them, save them till the end, or type them into the chat feature. As it relates to the purpose and the reason why we want this meeting to occur, is we really feel strongly here at the MHSA, as well as the Coach Association and GAM, that this is a partnership that can extend beyond this first kind of rules education. We want this to be an opportunity for you as coaches to get more in tune with what the rules of golf are. And we really believe that with Kyle's help, this is going to be the start of a great partnership to do that. And many times, as you all know, as coaches, you're the ones that have to interpret a rule, have to help out your kid. You're the adult in the situation or in the room, and a student athlete comes to you and says, what do I do when this happens? And you have to determine what the rule is, or at least know where to go to find the rule. That's one of the reasons why it's so important for we as coaches to have the knowledge, the basic knowledge of where to find the rules and what to do when there are situations our student athletes find themselves in. We are blessed with GAM's help to have our help at regionals. We go to another room for this. But the reality is that that doesn't happen during most of the regular season matches. And we simply don't have the ability to have those rules officials. No, it's just fine. So you have to act as that rules official. And I think that's real important as you go through this season and start off with what you're going to have to do with your kids. So with that said, I'm going to start us off with Kyle, and Kyle, turn it over to you. You've got the screen. Again, we feel very strongly this is a great opportunity for you to learn and to get some knowledge based upon right from GAM and expertise of Kyle, and make sure that, again, you have the ability to help your kids get better. So with that, Kyle, thanks again for being here, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Cody. Appreciate it. I think just to reiterate what Cody said about muting, if you can mute yourself in the lower left when you hover over the screen, please do that. I'm not going to talk over noise. It's distracting to everyone. So please mute yourself. It's a courtesy to everyone. If you don't know how to do that, Cody will.
Yeah, I'm going around and making sure I've got everybody muted if they're not. So.
All right. And again, just I want to echo what Cody said. Appreciate the opportunity to be here to talk to you all. If you have questions, definitely send them out in the chat. We can ask them, later during the presentation. We're going to try to get through as much stuff as we can. And there were some questions that Debbie sent over to me that I've kind of worked into the presentation here. So I won't wait any longer. We'll go ahead and get started here. We're gonna cover a couple of key things that you'll see. Some of this is going to be review for you. A lot of it is, hopefully review, but we'll get into some of the most common situations that you run to. So the biggest, I guess, rule that comes into play the most is how to drop a ball. When you're taking relief from a lot of situations, it involves dropping the ball. So as a lot of you know, dropping in 2019 looked a lot different than it did previously. We went from our shoulder height to our height of the knee. So when we drop the ball in the right way, we're dropping it, the player is dropping, they're dropping it straight down. They're not putting any weird spin or anything like that. It's coming right out of their hand. And again, it's from their knee height. Okay. And then we're going to show this concept of a relief area where the ball needs to hit in stay in order for it to be a proper drop. And then the ball needs to hit the course before it hits my foot or my club.
What makes you do it yourself? You gotta stick it up your nose yourself. How do you know how to do? I never heard of such a thing. You're not a professional. You can't stick it up your nose yourself. You wouldn't know how far to go. Are you sure?
Cody, there's a mute all button on your page. Well, I think it's just best.
Go to the hospital and get tested. Where do you get free testing? Let me look it up. Free testing. Free COVID test.
Okay, thanks, Cody. All right, good work there. All right, so really quickly, just going to show a quick video here of the dropping procedure.
When dropping your ball under the new rules, the likelihood you will need only one drop will increase, while the randomness of your resulting lie will be preserved. The procedure is simple. Hold the ball at knee height, let go of it so it falls straight down, and make sure that it lands and comes to rest in the relief area. Don't throw, roll, or spin the ball, and don't let it hit you as it falls. To learn more, please visit usga.org/rules.
All right, sounds like we're gonna have no videos for this, but I'm sure you can envision what that video was. It's sorry for whatever reason it's not working there. But basically, when we do drop again, it's knee height, and we'll get to this in a second here. But we're going to be dropping in a relief area. So that relief area is going to depend on what rule you're taking relief from. But it's typically going to be this 1 or 2 club length, kind of half pie or cone shaped area. So when we're dropping our ball, it needs to hit in here and it needs to stay in here. If it hits in here and rolls outside, whether it's closer or farther, then that means we need to redrop. And then again, if we on that second time we're gonna have that situation where it rolls out, we're gonna drop again, and then the same thing applies. It needs to stay in there. If it rolls out, then we're going to place the ball where it first struck the ground on that second drop. Okay. So if we have a situation here where, and I think I can draw here, but if I drop a ball and my ball hits where this blue X is, that is not in the relief area. So even if it did roll here, that's a bad drop and we need to drop again. So it has to hit here and stay in here in order for it to be a good drop. Okay, and when we're measuring out our club lengths, when we're trying to determine this, the club length is going to be determined by the longest club in your bag except your putter. So for 99% of golfers, that's going to be their driver. So when you're measuring out these relief areas, whether they're 1 or 2 club lengths, you want to use your driver to measure that area out. Okay, so here we have the situation. We have the same example here. We're taking relief from the sprinkler head. So for a sprinkler head or any other immovable obstruction like a cart path or the procedure for temporary water or ground under repair works the same way. But if we're taking relief from that, we're taking our nearest point of complete relief. So in this case here, we're going to take our stance, where our stance and our live ball and our club will not strike that sprinkler head. And from that point, that's where we put this T in the middle here, and we get 1 club length no closer to the hole. And that 1 club length is basically on a swivel from this middle point here. Okay, so if we do have, in this case here, like we talked about, it drops, it rolls forward, we're going to re-drop. And then if it happens again on the second try, if it happens in the second try, then we're going to place the ball where it hits the ground on the second try if it rolls out again. Okay. So again, that's going to apply to a lot of different rules that you encounter. So it's important to know that when you're dropping, hits in the relief area, stays in the relief area. If it doesn't, then we need to redrop. When we're searching for the ball, we have 3 minutes to find it. Okay, so this is a change as of a couple years ago, but the golfer has 3 minutes to find it. So when does my 3 minutes start? My 3 minutes starts when the player gets into the area that the ball is likely to be. Okay, so if mom and dad are out there and they're ahead like they should be, helping to spot balls, they can start looking before the player gets there, and that doesn't count in the 3 minutes. My 3 minutes starts as soon as the player gets in that area. And then there's some times where that 3 minute clock can stop. The most common one is if you're going to identify another golf ball, that time that it takes you to identify another golf ball does not count in the 3 minutes. Okay, but after 3 minutes, the ball's lost. It's not 3 minutes and 1 second or 3 minutes and 5 seconds. As soon as it's past 3 minutes, the ball is lost, and the player will need to go back to where they last played from under stroke and distance, or if they hit a provisional ball, then they can play that provisional ball at that point.
Kyle, if I can interrupt,
Yep.
We did have a question. If you can go back to the relief area.
Mm-hmm.
One of a coach asked, where is the hole in that example? Would it be at the top of the picture or the bottom of the picture?
Yep. So in this case here, the hole is towards the bottom of the picture. So we're playing this way.
Great. Thank
Yep.
you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, the other thing when you're searching for a ball, whether it's the player or a spectator or you as the coach, if you're searching for it and you accidentally move the ball, there's no penalty. We're just going to put the ball back where it was, and if we don't know the exact spot, we're going to estimate it. And this is only when we're searching. If we're just being careless and we're in the middle of the fairway and we put our clubs down and we are walking around to get a yardage or to do something else and we accidentally kick it, that's a penalty, and we need to put the ball back in either case, but it's only not a penalty if you accidentally move your ball while you're searching for it. And then there's a couple other examples where if you accidentally move the ball, there's no penalty. If it's on the tee or in the teen area of the hole that you're playing, or if it's on the putting green. In those cases, if it's accidental, you don't get a penalty and you just move the ball back. Okay, there's I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the flagstick and how that can be kept in at the player's choice. Every shot the player hits, they have the option to keep the flag in or take it out. Or have it attended. That kind of seems to have gone away, and really isn't probably doesn't apply a ton in high school events where there's not caddies or things like that. But the key thing with the flag stick is that that choice is the player's choice every time they hit a shot. So they can keep it in for the 40 footers and take it out for the 2 footers. That's completely up to them. And then the other thing with the flag stick is if it does hit the flag stick, there's no penalty, and they're just going to play the ball from where it comes to rest. The other common question we get about the flag stick is, well, what happens if the ball is touching the flag stick and the edge of the hole, and it's a little bit below the level of the ground? That in that case, as long as it's below the level of the ground, then it's the putt's good, and then the player can go on to the next hole. All right, Cody, do you want to answer that question about the flag stick?
Yeah, so I've got a couple, as long as we're on flag sticks here,
Yep.
One of the questions that's commonly come my way, and for those of you that coach girls, in the fall, you remember that within our return to play guidelines, we had that you could not touch flag sticks, common things like rakes, things like that. We have changed that for boys in the return to play guidance for golf for boys in the spring. And that is because the CDC and other health organizations have changed the guidance on how COVID is transmitted. It is not thought to transmit on surfaces nearly as much as it does in respiratory or air, breathing it in. Bottom line is, because of that and because of the CDC guidance, we have changed our return to play guidance, meaning you can touch the flag sticks, you can touch rakes, and be okay within the return to play guidance. So bottom line is that you can do those things, unlike what you could do in the fall for girls. And that's because of the way the updated guidance has changed, as well as what we know about COVID, very honestly, and how it's transmitted. Does not mean that you can't disinfect or you can't use wipes or things like that. You certainly can. And that most of the time we're finding is being done by the course themselves. And that's one of the reasons why we've changed that guidance. So hopefully that answers some of the many questions that are coming my way, as well as some things that are in the chat feature. With that, I'll turn it back over to you, Kyle, as it relates to provisional ball. I believe there's a question there. Can you review what a player needs to do to play a provisional ball? And then I'll get into that too if I need to. All right.
Okay, sure. So to answer the question about the provisional ball, so in order to play a provisional ball, the player just needs to announce that they're playing a provisional ball. That typically means including the words provisional ball. The only exception to that is if they included the rule number to the provisional ball, which I guarantee you, hopefully none of your players know that, or if they do, kudos to them. But they do need to mention the provisional ball or the rule that they're playing under that rule or playing a provisional ball in order to hit it. It's also a good idea that you make sure that when they are hitting a provisional ball that it's different than their first one, because if it's not different ball or a different number or different marking, it can cause issues if they hit it in the same or similar spot. So you could tell them to put a P on it, put a different dot on it, use a different brand, but just make sure that it's different when they hit a provisional ball. The only exception to provisional ball is that the player cannot, the player can play a provisional ball only when they think that their ball is lost or out of bounds. So if they're playing a hole where there's water down the entire left side of the hole and you can see it and it's clearly in the water, you can't hit a provisional ball in that case. Provisional ball is only for if it's lost or out of bounds. All right, and then there was a question about accidental movement on the putting green. So again, if a good example is if I'm on the putting green, I'm taking practice swings when my ball's on the putting green and I accidentally hit it, I don't mean to hit it. There's no penalty. and I just put that ball back. That answer is different if it happens on the fringe or in the fairway or in the rough, though. Only on the green is that not a penalty. And then there was a question about if it hits the flag stick and it breaks the surface. Again, it has to, if it's resting up against the edge of the hole and touching the flag stick, and part of the ball is below the level of the hole, then that putt is good. And you count the basket and go on to the next hole for that player. Okay. All right. So penalty areas. This is if you're not familiar, the new USGA term as of 2019 for water hazards are penalty areas. So these are those areas, red and yellow line staked areas that you see on the golf course, or other areas that you can define as the rules committee. So some of the things that you've used to have seen, creeks, ponds, etc. They can also include areas of unmaintained grass, wooded areas. You see that a lot up north here in Michigan or in certain places. But it's just important that when you are defining those areas that may not be clear, that the rule sheet or whatever you talk to the players at the beginning or talk to the coaches know exactly how it's defined. So in this middle picture here, you have that tall heather grass. You want to really make sure that everyone understands, where that heather grass starts and where the penalty area is defined in that case. So a lot of times it's as simple as, where the tall grass starts, and on, anywhere on the golf course it's defined as that. But that's something that the committee needs to be clear about. And I know you're probably not handing out rule sheets for some of your matches or events, but you want to make sure that at least the coaches understand that so they can talk to their players and communicate that.
And Kyle, if I can jump in here, one of the questions that commonly comes my way is about out of bounds and provisional ball and penalty areas and using the lateral relief, which sometimes can be a local rule. I need this to be heard clearly by this group, and so you can spread the word. Lateral relief is not a rule that will be used in MHSA tournament golf in any way, shape, or form, meaning regionals and finals, we will not use lateral. While you have the option as a conference or a league or a local course to use lateral, I would highly recommend you not do it, because it's not something you're going to be able to have your kids do during regionals or finals. And they're not going to get used to what the rule is, which will be played in the regionals and finals. If there are any questions about that, please let me know, but that's a common question that comes my way. And I think you're doing a disservice to your kids if you are having the choice to use lateral and you choose to use lateral, because you're not helping your kids as it relates to playing the tournament golf that we're going to be preparing them for at the end of the season. I'll leave it at that. And if there are questions, you can certainly let me know in the chat.
Yep, thanks, Cody. And then just to clarify that's the local rule for when a ball is lost or out of bounds and being able to go to the edge of the fairway and take 2 club lengths from that. That's what he's referencing there. So again, we at the GAM also support that statement, and that when people play by 2 or 3 different sets of rules, it makes it really difficult for them to understand. And I know that our officials and referees, when they're at the regionals, there is a lot of explaining that they have to do because people are used to doing that. And there is even a situation, I think this past, fall with the girls, where a player was actually disqualified because a coach thought that was in play and it wasn't. So just to echo what Cody said on that, it's best that you don't use that. All right, so with our penalty areas, we have two different types. We've got red and yellow, just like we did before, but now we're using the actual colors in the names, the yellow penalty areas and red penalty areas. For when we're taking relief, we have 2 relief options for red, 2 for yellow and 3 for red. So the biggest difference between, and we'll talk about this the main relief option that's not available in yellow but is in red is this lateral or 2 club length relief. So you cannot take 2 club lengths from yellow. It's really important to know, because if you do have yellow and players take 2 club lengths, 90 times out of 100, it's going to result in a disqualification for that player. So for yellow, there's no 2 club lengths, only 2 club lengths when it comes to red. If you're on a course, and you probably have this happen a lot, there's no stakes, there's no paint. If there's nothing in there, we're making the assumption that it's red, and that gives that player that extra relief option. So before we talk about the actual relief options, we need to make sure that we can actually take penalty area relief. So in order to take penalty area relief, we need to have either see the ball go in there, okay, whether it's a splash or we see it like it is here in this case, example here, the penalty area is to the left up top, or we need to have what's called knowledge of virtual certainty. So what that means is that we need to have evidence that it is in there, or we need to be 95% sure that the ball is in there. So if we hit the shot 20 times, 19 of them need to be in the penalty area. So if you look at the example in the bottom right, you've got an area here where there's no trees, the grass is all mown down, it's really short. There's really, if we go up there and we look for our ball and we can't find it, we can assume and have knowledge of virtual certainty that the ball's in the penalty area, because there's really nowhere else the ball could be. There's no out of bounds, there's no tree that would have hit, there's no tall rough outside the penalty area that the ball might be lost in. So we know that 19 out of 20 times that ball is in there. But that knowledge of virtual certainty goes away if we have trees, tall grass, out of bounds near this area where the ball could be lost. So just because there's a penalty area in the area, in the place where the ball is hit, doesn't necessarily mean that the player is always entitled to that relief. They need to be certain, they need to know it's in there, or have knowledge of virtual certainty that it's in there. Again, so it's conclusive evidence. So you see it, spectator sees it, a splash, something, or 95% or more likely that the ball is in there. And that always includes the small possibility that it doesn't go in there. In the example in the bottom right, if a ball is somehow plugged, and obviously there's that chance, but if it's dry out, that's a really low probability, and we can make that assumption that we can proceed and take our relief. All right, so for our red lateral relief, we have 3 options. We can go back under stroke and distance from where we last played from and play. Now, if we're going back to the tee, then obviously we can tee it up anywhere in the tee. If we're going back to a spot maybe in the middle of the fairway or somewhere not on the tee, we get from the point where we last hit it 1 club length, no closer to the hole, in this kind of half-shaped pie or moon shaped area in which to drop. And then if the other instance would be if the ball was last played on the putting green, we could place the ball back on the putting green. Hopefully that won't happen, but if you have a player that puts the ball into the water, they can take stroke and distance and place the ball back on the putting green. We can go back in a line relief. So what that is you take the point of where you last crossed the edge of the penalty area, which is marked by this arrow here, and the flagstick, which is out in the distance up ahead, and take those 2 points and go back on that line as far back as you want. And then on that line, there's a spot from which you get 1 club length in which to drop in. And then our last option is our lateral relief for our 2 club lengths. So we take our 2 club lengths from the point where we last crossed the edge of the penalty area. So in this case, in the lower right part of the picture, this golfer here is left-handed. He's hitting at us, so it's a tad bit confusing. But you have that point where you last crossed 2 club lengths, no closer to the hole, and then it goes all the way back, but it doesn't include the area inside the red penalty area, because we can't in order, if we're taking relief, we need to take it out of it completely. But one thing to keep in mind for penalty area relief is that you're not entitled to a stance in this case. So if you're a right-handed golfer and you're hitting at us, hitting at the screen here, if your ball happened to drop and it ended up, in a spot here very close, you're not entitled. I mean, you might have to stand in the water to hit that shot, because if your ball is outside the penalty area, it's in play. So it's important to know that you should be dropping, as far away as possible if you're a right-handed player, so you don't have to stand in the water there.
Kyle, just to be clear, one of the other options is to play the ball as it lies. You do not have to take relief, correct?
Correct. Yes. Yep. These are just relief options under one stroke penalty. You can play it as it lies. You'll see a slide in there.
Okay. Thank you.
But that's a good point. Then there's a couple of questions about the players agreeing that it went into the penalty area, or is it at the sole discretion of the player? So in that case, it's best if there's consensus amongst the group. But ultimately, when we're dealing or finding out where it last crossed that red line, it really is only 1 point, right? So if you have people that are arguing about it, then we need to get some consensus about where it is. And if we can't agree on that, then we're going to have to use the best knowledge to our ability and pick a spot and go. I know that's not probably the answer that you want to hear, because I know I've been involved in situations where I think it's one place and the player thinks it's one place, but ultimately there needs to be some agreement, and if there's not agreement, then you're going to go with what the player decides in that case. But again, and then the other thing to keep in mind with that, and I know a lot of you on the call know this, it's not where the ball is, it's where it last crossed this red line. So my ball might have last crossed the red line here, but it might be in the water 20 yards farther up. And so a lot of times what I'll do is, if I'm explaining it to someone, we just use, simple physics. If they say their ball, last crossed up where, near where their ball is, I tell them, well, can your ball defy physics and make a 90-degree left-hand turn into the water here? Like, I don't think so. Like the tee's here, the ball is here. It had to have crossed farther back than where you think it is. So you can use, some math to your, or geometry to your assistance in that case. There was a question about the lateral relief. So this lateral relief option right here under this rule, this is okay. This is allowed by the rules. This is what is commonly referred to as the two club length option for hitting it in a red penalty area. That's allowed. There's no issue with that. The relief that Cody was talking about, again, is if it's a local rule for if your ball is out of bounds or lost and going to the edge of the fairway and taking 2 club lengths from that point, that's not going to be allowed. There's a question about grounding your club in a penalty area. That's now okay. You can ground your club, take practice swings in a penalty area. That's not a problem. Can you get relief from penalty area stakes? So penalty area stakes, those red stakes or yellow stakes, those can be removed. They can be pulled out. So in those cases, you don't necessarily get relief. Just take them out and then put them back in the spot where they were after you've hit your shot. Out of bounds stakes are different. Out of bounds stakes you cannot move. Those need to stay. Those are fixed. So player does not get relief from out of bounds stake. They'll need to play it. If they want to take relief, it'll be a penalty relief under unplayable ball in that case. just read through some questions here. So if a player hits the ball into the water from the tee, do they have to tee it back up from the tee box? I think. So yeah. So in that case, if they hit it into the water off the tee, they don't need to re-tee. They can take any of the options here. They can go back in a line relief. They can take their lateral relief 2 club lengths from where it last crossed the edge of the penalty area. So let me just show. So here's just a visual of what we were just talking about here. So when we see that we have our ball here that ended up way up here, we're not taking relief here. We're going to where we last, this X marks the spot where we last crossed the edge of the penalty area. Again, using the tee and the physics of the line of the shot to determine that point. And then we can take 2 club lengths, which is this 3 option. We can go back in a line with where that point was in the flag as far back as we want. That's option 2. Or we can go back to where we last played from, which in this case is the teen area. Okay. So, and then going to yellow, the only thing that is different between red and yellow is that with yellow, we're just Xing out option 3 here. So option 3 is not an option with yellow. Okay, this area would never be marked as yellow. Typically, you'll see yellow in front of a green. And the reason it's marked yellow over red is because the golf course or the rules committee believes that crossing it and having a ball come to rest on the other side of it is important. So, you know, Eagle Eye number 17 or TPC Sawgrass number 17, that's a most common example of that. All right, so there is a good question about putting down tees. So if you remember back to that picture where we had the relief area, the player is not required to place down tees, but it's a good idea that they at least put that initial point or the end point down. So when we're talking about our two club lengths for lateral, let me see if I can get back to that picture. It's a good idea that they put a T here to signify the end of it, so they know the area in which they're going to drop in. They don't need to put all the T's down, but it's a good idea that they do. And then in this case here, when we're dropping on a line back, it's a good idea to put a T in the ground where this X is, because that if we do have to measure, if it rolls outside the teeing area, we have that point in which to mark. So again, not required. If you have players that know what they're doing, they probably don't need to do this. But as a good learning technique for people to understand how it is, it's probably a good idea to have them do that, or maybe do it in practice rounds or something like that, so they get the hang of it. All right, so yellow, stroke and distance, and back in a line, no 2 club lengths from yellow. As was said earlier, we can play the ball as it lies. There's no penalty for that. And again, we can ground our club. We can remove loose impediments, things of that nature. So we had a good question come in before about when a player misses the green and it's surrounded by penalty area, it's often difficult for the player to determine a spot that's not near the hole when taking lateral relief 2 club lengths. Okay, so the answer to this is that the player is not entitled to each relief option under the rules of golf. Proceeding under stroke and distance would be the player's relief option that they would choose in that case if they can't take 2 club lengths that doesn't, or that is not farther away from the hole. In these cases, if they come up, it's a good idea to have a drop zone in place so that you can accommodate for this situation. So here's just a picture of a hole to use an example. You have the hole is being played this way, so down from the bottom up. And in this case here, we have a penalty area all the way around here, and then another one here. And so in this case here, if I hit the ball off to the left side here, I've got the cart path and the penalty area. When I take 2 club lengths, I'm either going to be on the cart path, and then after I'm on the cart path, I have nowhere to go, or it's going to be challenging to go. And in this case, 2 club lengths is probably not going to be an option that I'm gonna be able to take. But in this case, what we would do as a rules committee is we would put in a drop zone here, and we'd have a stake here and a stake here, and on the rule sheet say if your ball crosses between those 2 stakes, usually we use a different color stake. I know this is getting a little complicated, but you could ask your golf course to help you with areas like these, or maybe your home course has an area like this, where if it says the ball enters in the penalty area between these 2 stakes, you can use the drop zone as an additional relief option. So we do that at least once a year. Any tournament we have at the Boyne Heather course, we always use that. So if you have a home course that you play that has this situation come up, feel free. I've got my contact information at the end. Give me a call or email, and we can talk about how to get it set up so that for your events you don't run into this situation. The other thing that kind of gets to this question is that at this curve here, that when you try to take 2 club lengths and not there's just nowhere that you can take 2 club lengths and not be closer to the hole. And if you have a situation like that, it's that 2 club lengths is just not an option for the player to use. All right, again, we talked about being able to remove loose impediments, take practice swings, grinding our club and penalty area. That's not a problem. Just need to be careful when we are removing loose impediments that the ball doesn't move. The ball moves when we're moving a loose impediment, a pine cone or something like that. We're going to get a 1-stroke penalty. We need to put the ball back. Loose impediments, for those of you that don't know that terminology, it's anything that's natural, that's loose, that's not attached. So leaf, pine cone, pine straw, rocks, things of that nature. Okay, and this just talks about practice swings. The key thing with practice swings is that we cannot improve our next shot. So if we're in a area of tall grass, I can't just say, oh, I'm going to take a bunch of hacks in here to make my next shot easier. In that case, I would want to take 3 or 4 steps back, take my practice swings in a similar area that's not going to improve my lie or my next shot, and then go up and hit my shot there. All right, so with bunkers, a lot of that stuff that we just talked about in terms of loose impediments is the same thing with loose impediments. We can move those, but again, the caveat that if we do move it and it causes the ball to move, we're going to get a penalty and we have to put it back. The biggest difference between the bunker and the penalty area is that we're not allowed to ground our club in the bunker. And this is, I think a lot of people understand this, but even under the new rules, you cannot ground your club in the bunker. Okay, there are certain things that you can do in touching the sand, though. You can take your stance. You can lean on the club to rest or prevent a fall. So if I'm just sitting there and I just put my club and it happens to hit the sand, that's okay, provided I was just doing it to rest or prevent a fall, and I wasn't trying to do it to figure out how soft or how hard the sand was. If there's any kind of that intent, then we got an issue there. You can lay your clubs in the sand if you want. If I've done a presentation for your high school before pre-COVID, I always make the joke that if the player wants to take their push cart, run it right up in the bunker, they can. There's no penalty for that. A lot of confusion about a penalty or not, but there's no penalty there. Common scenario where this happens, you have 3 clubs and you're not sure what you're going to hit. You pick one and you lay the other 2 down in the sand. That's okay. If you're measuring, marking the ball or anything like that, anything that pertains to the rules, you can touch the sand. you're caring for the course, raking the sand, you can do that. And then if you do happen to strike the sand in frustration or anger, there's no penalty for that now. But we obviously don't encourage that. All right.
We got a couple questions there on drops.
Yep. Okay, so there was a question about the dropping on the cart path. So if we go back to this to this just example here, it's way back, but so if we go back to this example, yes, if you took 2 club lengths, you would drop on the cart path, and then they would take separate cart path relief for that. But in this case here, if you take 2 club lengths, you know, you would be dropping here, and then you'd have to go even farther back in this case, which most people aren't going to figure out. You're going to need a rules official or a coach to figure that out. So that's why it's a good idea to put a drop zone in these scenarios, because it just speeds everything up, makes it really easy for the players to decide. But yes, you can drop on the cart path. You can take, if you're taking the lateral relief, in this case here, your 2 club lengths, you can definitely drop on the cart path, play it off the cart path, or at that point then take separate cart path relief. That's totally fine. There's a question about players that know what they're doing and are dropping a ball near the boundary or the edge of that relief area. Yes, that is you know, something to be aware of, in that if you have people trying to get the spot or trying to get it to roll out so they can place it, that's something that, you know, I guess you need to be aware of. But you know, most times we haven't seen a lot of players do that in our events. Not to say that it doesn't happen, but that is something that could happen. Players could drop near the very, very corners of those relief areas, knowing very well that if it rolls outside there, they get to place it after that second try.
Paul, you had a question about course rates to rake the sand. That's what we talked about earlier with the new CDC guidance. The return to play guidance for the spring golf and boys golf is that you can use course rakes and flag sticks that can be touched. Unlike in the girls season, when we advise that not to happen with the change of how COVID is spread, it just simply isn't something that needs to be considered this year in boys. Doesn't mean, again, it can't be disinfected. Course can't do that, but you can touch the rakes, you can touch the flag stick as needed.
And there were a couple of questions. One that was related to grounding your club in a bunker, so I put it in here. But again, we talked about that. You cannot ground your club in the bunker. Yes, in the penalty area, but not in the bunker. There are those few exceptions that we talked about. There's another question about a training aid or an alignment rod. Players can carry those in their bag. That's not a problem. They just cannot use it during the round for its intended purpose. So if it's in there and they take it out and they use it to swing to warm up during the round, that's a penalty. But if they got the orange whip in their bag and they carry it in there, that's fine. Same thing with the alignment rod. If they take it out of their bag because they're trying to find their cell phone that went down there, there's no penalty for taking it out of your bag. There's only a penalty if you use it. All right, unplayable. For unplayable, you can take an unplayable ball anywhere on the golf course except in the penalty area. So in the general area, which is a term for fairway, rough, the bunker, in the teen area or on the putting green, but you cannot take it in the penalty area. And if your ball's in the penalty area, you take penalty area relief to get out of that situation. So with an unplayable, it's a 1-stroke penalty, and we have three options to pick from. We can go stroke and distance. So again, that point where we last played, 1 club length from that point, no closer to the hole. If it's not in the tee, if it's on the tee, we can tee it up anywhere in that tee. We can go back in a line. And when we do back in a line with unplayable, we take the flag stick, and then our second point is the point where the ball was. and we can go back on that line as far back. And then on that line, we get 1 club length area left or right in which to drop in. And then the last option for an unplayable is 2 club lengths. And I've told the USGA I don't like this picture that they put in there, but I guess we need to get an updated one. But in this case here, don't look too literally at this picture because you would get free relief in this case. But if you do take unplayable, it's 2 club lengths from where the ball is, no closer to the hole. Okay, it's not 2 club lengths from where I don't have any interference from the bush or whatever. It's 2 club lengths from where the ball is. And again, that's either left or right in this case here. All right, let's try this.
The rules permit you to freely exchange advice with your caddy or partner, but you're required to act alone when making a stroke. Under the 2019 rules, once you start taking your stance for a stroke, neither your caddy nor partner are allowed to stand behind you. To learn more, please visit usga.org/rules.
All right, so I know there's no caddies or partners in high school play, but that same rule that you just saw there about being able to help line your players up also applies to advice givers, which that's the term for coaches under the rules of golf, and advice givers. So again, when your player goes to take their stance, you cannot be behind them on the line, helping them line up or even standing there. So if your player is in a situation like that and you're behind them and lining them up, you need to move out of the way. The player needs to back off their stance and then retake their stance. This is in the fairway, on the tee, on the green, anywhere on the course. The coach cannot stand back there. You can still, at the very beginning of the picture, you saw, you can still stand side by side with your player and tell them, okay, we're going to aim at the right side of the fairway here. But as soon as they go to start taking their stance, you need to get out of the way.
One of the other questions, Kyle, if I can jump in here about advice, is advice between teammates or conversations on the course that may occur between playing partners or same teammates from the same team. The same rule applies there. And as far as an interpretation from the MHSA would go, that wouldn't and shouldn't be allowed during the course of a round. Teammates, other than good job, how's it going, things like that, really shouldn't have conversations about a hole played or a hole that is going to be played or what club to use. Those types of things can only lead to problems. So please make sure you're reminding your player there about your players about that.
Yep, that's not only from the high school standpoint, but from a rules of golf standpoint. A teammate is not a partner, which is the only person that someone can get advice from other than a caddy or a coach. So from a rules of golf standpoint, that's an issue as well. Okay, so there was a question about going back to taking 2 club lengths for an unplayable. Again, an unplayable would be not that pictured situation with the sprinkler box. Imagine the ball is in the middle of a bush. You get 2 club lengths from that point where the ball is. And it's not where you're getting complete relief outside of that bush or where you can stand. It's from the point where the ball is, 2 club lengths, no closer to the hole in either direction for an unplayable. So there's a question about whether if you're standing behind simply to help see the ball, that's something that it's a good question. But what we recommend is that in those cases you take 2 or 3 steps to the right or to the left, and then after they hit, take those couple steps over and see. But you can't be on that line. So if it's that important for you to be exactly on that line, and you're putting your player in jeopardy of getting penalty, and a lot of people might not think that you're actually doing that. You might say that, but whether you're actually doing that could be another thing. So it's just best to take a couple steps right or left, and then after they hit, move back if you need to get directly behind where they were to see it. So yeah, so there was a question about advice from coaches. So I got, yes, the MHSA allows a coach to be an advice giver, and you can give advice to players on your team in regards to anything, how to play the shot, you know, course management, etc.
Remember, that's tee to green as well. So while they're on the green, not allowed in any way, not allowed to line up putts or read putts or things like that. It's tee to green. And again, as I've said quite often to coaches, coaching can be very well done or overdone. And the best coaches know when to make the statement to their players and when to coach, and also know when to lay off and let their players play. And the reality is, good coaching helps pace of play, and it speeds up pace of play. It doesn't slow it down. I think that's the other thing to remember as we go through this.
And then Debbie asked a question about players playing the course of their match the day of the event. So yeah, it's a good question. Players not allowed to play the competition course the day of the match or the tournament before they actually play. So if they play before, then that player, if they do play in the match, would be disqualified. So it's a good thing to let your players know that they should not be playing on the competition course before the match or the tournament.
There's a question about how many coaches are allowed on the course. This is one of the challenges during the regular season that your league or conference may allow differently than during the postseason. The postseason, there would be limits on a coach, and we changed that a little bit during the girls' season and limited that. We'll also go back to what at regionals and finals, there will be one coach allowed. So if you've got multiple coaches, you need to make sure that you understand that one coach is allowed during regionals and finals for MHSA tournament play as it relates to that. So you can't have one coach on one 9 and another coach on the other 9. So that's something to keep in mind. Fred also talked about parents' involvement. One of the rules for MHSA golf is that 25 yards is a rule of thumb that we state for patrons or spectators or parents. Also, parents can't give advice. We've had lots of challenges with parents being too close to kids, trying to help out their kids too much. And bottom line is that's not allowed. And you need to remind your parents that they're putting their players in jeopardy when they do that.
So there was another question about so teammates cannot help each other with yardages or green reading. So yardages is information that is public knowledge. So anyone can help out with a yardage. So if I'm in a group and I'm the only one that has a rangefinder, I can shoot it and tell everyone in the group it's 170 yards to the flag. That's something that can be shared with anyone in the group. But reading greens, those are things that cannot happen by anyone on the team or anyone in the group. That would be advice if that's given to any person playing.
I'm just going down our questions here as they come in. So Kevin asked a good question about why we limit the number of coaches. I'll give you a couple of reasons for this. One, very honestly, it's been abused. And it's been abused pretty clearly by coaches, meaning everybody's a coach. And it becomes who is actually the coach and who's in charge. Part of that problem has reared its ugly head at most inopportune times, whether it been at regionals or finals. Part of that is the challenge of slowing play down. Multiple coaches slow play down, and coaches, very honestly, at times will overcoach at the most inopportune times, and that hurts pace of play. So part of that challenge has been making sure that we manage coaches and making sure that we help players with pace of play. And it's been the rule for many years now, and help. It doesn't mean that you can't have more than one coach coaching or being a part of a team, but it's actual coaching on the course is the issue that occurs. So hopefully that answers your question, Kevin. Moving on, some other questions about rangefinders that have the slope capability on. Yes, that is not allowed by MHSA rule. Anything other than distance is not allowed by MHSA rule. And many of those, whether they be Bushnell or others that have the red or green indicator on top, you can show when you have anything other than distance activated on that distance finder.
Hey, Debbie, I promise I'll get to your question. I got it here in a second on a slide. Promise I'll get to that. All right, so really quick before we get to the questions here. If a player does not know what to do, they can play the 2-ball rule. So that's now under the new rules 28.1C3. Probably no one's gonna remember that wording. It used to be really easy, 3-3. Now it's 20.1C3. But the theory and the concept behind the 2-ball rule still applies. They need to decide that they're going to play 2 balls before they make a stroke. They need to choose which ball, or they should choose which ball they will count for their score by announcing this choice to the other players in the group. If they don't choose, then the ball that's played first is going to be treated as the ball chosen by default. And then after they hole out with both balls, they need to report the facts of the situation to the rules committee or to their coach, even if the score is the same for both balls. And the reason for that is that they might have the same score 6, but one of the rule or one of them, they broke a rule, and we need to know that. So they need to tell the coach what happened. If they don't tell the coach or anyone what happened, the player is disqualified under the rules of golf if they play 2 balls. Okay, so 2 balls is a good rule. If you're not sure what to do, could be even yourself. The rules committee is not sure what to do. Well, let's play 2 balls so we can keep the pace going, and then we can figure out and call the GAM or text the GAM and find out what the ruling is, or call Cody and find, maybe not call Cody, but
Yeah.
and then you can figure out the ruling later. So it's a good option to keep in the back of the player's mind, especially if you don't have a ton of rules help out there. It's a good option to use. Okay. So a couple questions. Are phone apps allowed to be used for yardage? By the rules of golf, phone apps are allowed to be used. Cody, you might have a different set of rules for that, but as long as it's yardage only, no slope, that is okay by the rules of golf.
And yes, that is correct. And remember that we've allowed that in 4 instances in golf: to call a coach or tournament manager for a health or safety issue, to call a rules official with questions, to input scores for live scoring or other scoring programs being used, and to use as a distance measuring device. Those are the 4 reasons you can use a cell phone while on the course. As we talk about live scoring and other scoring programs, before we end the call, we'll talk about iWanamaker and that MHSA golf app again. something that's going to be used this season in boys as it was in girls with great success.
Okay, and then there was a question about players that are playing with you allowed to stand directly behind on the tee, or allowed to stand in back of or in front of the opponent while they putt. There's no rule prohibiting that for other players to do that, but it's if they're using it to get an advantage, then that's going to be an issue. And it's also bad etiquette to stand behind on someone's line. So typically, what you would have to do, that the player would ask them to move out of the way, or other players in the group, if they were, people from the same team standing behind to watch it, then they would need to tell them that, they would tell them to move out of the way. If they didn't move out of the way, they would be getting, help, and that could potentially, get to a penalty if there was purpose behind doing that. All right, a couple questions on the screen here. So we talked about the same players in the same team offering advice. Again, from a rules golf perspective, the only advice a player can get is from their caddy, partner, or a person designated as the advice giver in team competitions. A teammate is not a partner. Can we get a free drop if the group decides that a player's ball is likely lost due to being embedded? The answer, no. For the player to take embedded ball relief, they need to find the ball. There is a provision under Rule 16.1E for free relief if it is known or virtually certain that a ball came to rest in or on an abnormal course condition, so temporary water, ground and repair. A good example of that would be your ball is going into a bunker that's completely full of water. You see the splash, you know it's in there. You don't need to actually go in and find it. That water might be two feet deep. So it's in there. You have knowledge of virtual certainty that it's in there, and you can take a free relief in that case. But for a ball that's embedded, there are a lot of different places it can be. If that area where it is embedded is ruled as ground under repair, then there's potential for that. But typically, that's not the case. It's just a soft area. So I know this came up, I think, in an event on Monday, and just because the group agrees that it's probably or likely to be embedded does not mean they get relief from that. All right, what about scoring disputes? So a couple of scenarios. Scenario one, player A says he or she made a 3. Player B says they made a 4. The shots are replayed. They talk about them and discussed. Player B claims that player A chunked a chip shot, but player A says that is not true. It didn't happen. And there are no other witnesses for us to ask. Scenario 2, player B and C say player A made a 4. Player A denies this and says he or she made a 3. Players are unable to recall the shots and no witnesses. So these situations come up all the time. They come up in our events. They come up in your events. Ultimately, players A word should be taken unless there are situations that the committee believes warrant taking the side of the other players. So those could be character assessments, previous history of similar issues. If the other players don't agree with the outcome, they can refuse to sign the scorecard. That won't change the outcome, but it does allow the players to quote unquote wash their hands of the issue. So I'll use an example that happened in our events last summer. We had a situation where player says that I made 4. The 2 other players in the group said no, they made a 6. We talked about it. We went through shot by shot. Ultimately, the player that said they made a 4 couldn't come and tell us that, yes, I know for sure I made a 4. He said, I think I did. So ultimately we went with the 2 players that were confident of what happened. And then later on, the parent came and talked to us and said, no, I was there. This is what happened. And all these stories started changing. The facts of the situation started changing. That was a red flag that something was going on. So in this case, even though the player thought that they made this, we ruled against him because, you know, he wasn't 100% sure that it happened, and also his story was changing. There were a lot of factors that just made us believe that the other two people were saying the right thing and he wasn't. So there's lots of things to look at in those cases. But you know, at the end of the day, if there's no agreement, then you do go with what the player says. But a lot of times, you as coaches know certain players and know what they'll say or what they'll do, and might have previous history of doing certain things. So free. There was a question about free relief. So free relief is going to vary based on what the situation is. But typically, when we talk about free relief, we're talking about a scenario like cart path or temporary water, and that procedure is the nearest point of complete relief. So if we go back and we think about that picture with the sprinkler head, where we're taking our stance, where we don't have interference from the sprinkler head or the temporary water, and where our club is not going to hit that sprinkler head or temporary water, and our ball will not be in that area. That's how we take relief. We find that point, and then from that point, we get one club length no closer to the hole. So that's a typical free relief option, but it does vary slightly depending on what we're talking about.
So I think, Kyle, we're kind of coming up to the end here. I know a couple more slides?
I think this is my last one.
Okay, good. All right, perfect.
There's a new rule about a ball that stays in the teen area and options for a player to play their next shot. Please explain. So if the ball remains in the teen area after the shot is played, the player can play the ball anywhere in that teen area, including picking it up and re-teeing it. But it's very important to understand that the teen area means the area that is the two club lengths from the front of the tee marker to the set of tees that the golfer is playing on that hole. So if I hit it 20 yards forward and it's on the teen ground, that's not the teen area. The teen area is only from the set of tees I'm playing and 2 club lengths back. So if I were to hit a tree and it bounces back and ends up in that area, in that 2 club length area, I can pick it up and re-tee again, no penalty. Or if I, top the shot or hit it, and it goes 1 inch forward, but it's still within that 2 club lengths, starting from the front of the tee going back, again, I can pick it up and re-tee it, no penalty. Hopefully it doesn't happen a lot, but I've heard a couple of scenarios where it does. Last thing before Cody, I'll say that I'll stay on for however, if there's questions after people have, I'd be happy to stay on and answer them or answer them in the chats while you're talking about other things. There are a ton of great resources. If you have a raining day, there are a ton of great resources on the USGA website under the playing tab and rules of golf education. Videos, some of which you saw today, that players can watch, resources for you to use. Also, highly recommend that you have your players download the Rules of Golf app on their phone. It's a great tool. They can search for things. There's videos in there. It's a really great resource for them to have. They're probably not going to carry it in their bag, but maybe they'll keep an app on their phone. And then I've got my name and my email and my phone number down there. If you ever have questions during your events, call, text me. Probably, we're happy to help. I got a text from a coach in the Saginaw area the other day. I'm happy to help answer those. Please, use us as a resource. So, and thanks, Mark, for sharing that link. There's great resource there.
Yes, thank you, Kyle. Couldn't thank you enough for your time and expertise. Bottom line is, Matt had a point here for everybody. That's a whole nother Zoom meeting for us, Matt. So I would applaud USGA for making the rules of golf simpler. It has been a huge change. So we're trying to get there. We're trying to give you some education so you can help your kids. Certainly, golf is a rules-based game, and because of that, there are a lot of challenges to it. But thank you for what you do for your kids. A couple of things I want to leave you with as far as MHSA play. This season is going to be a challenge. There's no other way to put it. As it was in the girls' season, we're going to have some challenges to get through together, and it's going to mean that you have to work with some rules that are outside of all of our control, and that means things like masks. Bottom line are, this isn't a political statement, but it's one of those statements that we have to rely upon. Your kids, while in active participation, while golfing, do not have to wear a mask. It's not a requirement. We showed that we could do that safely in the girls' season, and we think we can do the same thing for boys, and that's what we've shared with MDHHS and the other decision makers as it comes to that. You know they're being tested at least once a week by your school. That's a requirement. That's something that your school is doing. Please understand that other people that come to your course, that parents and spectators and others need to wear a mask, and you as a coach need to wear a mask. This is the only way that golf's going to continue, and it's not a political statement, it's not a right or wrong thing, it's the bottom line is if we want golf to continue, that's what we have to do. So please know that you're also not the mask police, but in many cases, you're the adult that's most representative of the school. So please make sure that you understand that you might have to be the one that makes that statement or tells your AD we've got issues, or tells your parents we've got to be better tomorrow than we were today at a match. Final thing is, you got an email today from Cole, who helped me with golf here at the MHSA, and that was about I Wanamaker. If you have not read that, please do so. Please make sure you spend some time on that. This is the MHSA Golf app, which is powered and presented by I Wanamaker. We had great success using this in the girls' season. It will help you and your program, I promise you. It will give your parents the ability to follow along with their golfers, even if they can't be at the course. And it allows you to set up and administrate a golf match much easier than normal. It is the way of the future, and it's the way we are going to go forward with golf at the MHSA. So please understand, if you're not familiar with this, take time to get familiar with it. There are great tutorial videos and opportunities for you. Please make sure that you do that. Again, thank you for what you do. We're going to, again, post this online, so you're going to be able to see this on MHSA, have your players be able to follow along with this. If you haven't already seen, we have some regional sites posted. We're going with regionals and then finals as normal. Those things are on. As with everything in this day and age we live in, things can change, but bottom line is that's where we're at right now. Kyle posted a link there for the rules quiz, so you can follow along with a rules quiz there and follow along with helping your kids get better on those things. With that, I'm going to end or let Kyle hang on, and Kyle and I will hang on with any questions. Otherwise, you can end, and I'm going to pause and stop the recording. Thanks again. Have a great night. Keep doing what you're doing for kids, and we'll get through this.